Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Very recently, like 2 days ago, I was tagged, my first time ever, by my fellow booktuber, Epic Tales, to do the back to school tag, which contains 8 school themed questions about books, and it's just another way to get to know more about me and things that I'm interested in. So without further ado, let's launch into this tag. Question number 1, new school year, the start of something new. Pick an awesome debut novel. What better book for this than the first one from an all-time great series, Redwall by Brian Jacques, the titular first book in the series. I chose this not only because it was a huge part of my youth, but also because the story behind its publication is actually really interesting. The book debuted in 1986, but Jacques actually did not intend for it to be published. His former English teacher, Alan Durban, who also apparently taught Paul McCartney and George Harrison of the Beatles fame, showed it to his publisher, basically said they'd be fools not to publish it, and then Jacques ended up with a 5-book contract. The original handwritten manuscript was actually gigantic, like 800 pages or something. Back then, it was not common for children's books to be printed as more than 200 pages, and actually the success of Harry Potter helped break that barrier for good, so this thing was quite a behemoth for its time. I will say that Redwall has some peculiarities of its own that none of the other books in the series have, such as references to humans, though you never see any on screen, and larger animals like a horse and a beaver. Such things don't appear in the later books, as Jake solidified his vision for his world. So the funny little things aside like that, it's still a terrific tale of good versus evil, featuring both wonderful heroes and villains, all as talking animals. Question 2, teachers. They're here to teach and guide you. Pick a character that is full of sage-like wisdom. I feel like I have to pick Moiraine Damodred from The Eye of the World. I'm a huge Wheel of Time fan, although hot take, I'm not that excited about the show. And Moiraine as a mentor figure was a huge lasting impression on me as a teenager. She manages to be super patient with the group of knuckleheads that she's trying to keep alive, sometimes despite their own best efforts. I was also a teacher actually for a few years, so I understand the potential frustration, but also the rewards of getting young people to listen to your wisdom. Number 3, favorite subject. Everyone has that one class that's their favorite. Recommend a book from your favorite genre. I'm gonna go ahead and break the rules, something I never actually did in school, and pick 2 books. The first, of course, is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. I can say with no exaggeration that this is possibly the most important, impactful book I've ever read. This was the book that made me say, I want to do this. I want to write epic fantasy. In a similar vein, my second book is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, because the Stormlight Archive is basically the modern version of The Wheel of Time. As you can tell, this is a hefty book, kind of a big chunker. And the Stormlight Archive as a whole is a big blockbuster series that, in my opinion, promises to be an all-time great. And I love that Sanderson is really pushing how weird you can get with world building in fantasy novels. Number 4, Syllabus, the basic layout for everything that's going to happen in the semester. Pick a book that was predictable. Believe it or not, this was actually a really hard question for me to answer because I think I have a more favorable view of predictability than a lot of other readers. Often nowadays, it kind of seems like people want something that is wholly original, unlike anything else they've ever seen before. But if you distill stories down to their most basic elements, they're basically all going to sound the same. I always have this question of how far do you drill down until you conclude that everything's the same? Is expecting a protagonist to triumph over the antagonist predictable? Possibly, but I honestly can't think of a single story where the antagonists actually win at the very end of all things. Take Star Wars as a popular example. Episode 5 ends on a pretty bittersweet note. Luke lost his hand, Han has been frozen, the rebellion is kind of scattered, but episode 6 ends with the final-ish victory over the Empire. So as a whole, we as humans just consume stories to see characters that we care about be triumphant. That doesn't mean a bad person can't be a protagonist, but a protagonist's job is basically to be successful eventually. So that's just a little bit of a rant about predictability. I bet you didn't predict that. So that aside, I'm going to go with The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. Not that the whole book was predictable, but I mentioned in my review a few weeks ago that there were 3 men involved in the murder of the main character's father. The main character is Tao. And I basically called it, when that happened, what paths those 3 men would take. Now, I didn't anticipate every single step of the path, so I wouldn't call the whole story predictable, just certain fates in the story. But that's all I really got for that one. Number 5, pencils. I knew I was supposed to be taking notes, but mainly I would just draw. Pick a character who's an artist. It's funny because that was actually me in school. By the end of every single school year, without fail, I would have more doodles than notes in my notebooks. So the character, it's Shallan, obviously, from The Way of Kings and the rest of the Stormlight Archive. Shallan really just stands out as a definitive artistic character in fantasy novels. And part of the brilliance of the Stormlight Archive as a whole is putting sketches into the books that are Shallan's in-universe drawings. So we're not only reading about her being an artist, but we're also getting to see her as an artist in these books. Number 6, books. You know, those things that have all the knowledge in them. What book are you currently reading? So I am sort of reading 3 books right now. First, we've got Dune, of course, because the movie's coming out soon, and there's also a reread going on Epic Tales Discord. You can find the link on his channel if you want to check it out. Then we've got The Way of Kings Prime, which is actually Sanderson's first attempt at writing The Way of Kings. I don't have a physical copy for this book, so we'll just use our imaginations right here. Prime is a non-canonical, almost like alternate world sort of story to the published version, and while the published version is quite different, you can actually see threads of plots and characters both that eventually made it into the published series. And then finally, I've got my own book, since I'm working on a revision for my creative thesis. And actually, I will share with you the working title that I think I've committed to for the time being.
Drum roll, please.
Which is going to be The Broken God. It's really hard to judge your own work, both from like an objective writing craft standpoint and a subjective how am I enjoying this standpoint, since you can't ever fully divorce yourself from something that you've created. But I have to say overall, it's not bad. I'm actually kind of enjoying it. That's actually a really huge step up for how I usually view my own writing. And hopefully maybe one day when it's published, all of you will get to enjoy it as well. You can definitely see the Wheel of Time inspiration in my book, especially Eye of the World, but in much the same way that the Wheel of Time starts off feeling a little bit like Lord of the Rings and then kind of diverges from there, so too does my story with the Eye of the World, and I think that's okay. All right, number 7, backpack. I used to cram entirely too much stuff into mine. This tag knows me so well. Pick a book that just had entirely too much crammed into it. This might shock and awe some of you, for as much as I love Brandon Sanderson's books, I actually picked the 4th book in the Stormlight Archive series, Rhythm of War. I enjoyed the book overall, but it's actually my least favorite of the 4 that are published in the series. I mentioned in my Elantris review, which you should also check out, that Sanderson perhaps overwrote some scenes, and I think that issue got kicked way up in this book. Granted, this was a big convergence for a lot of the major elements of his Cosmere, which is a shared universe of all his adult fantasy stories, but overall it probably could have been cut down by about 100 or 200 pages, which still would have left a 1,000 page book and told mostly the same story. But I'm obviously still mega hyped for book 5. And number 8, School Friends. Tag some people to do this tag. Well, this is exciting. I've never gotten to tag anybody before. I'm going to tag David DeCero and Pablo Suarez, 2 other people whose Discord servers I frequently haunt. David's actually reading The Eye of the World for the first time, and he's been doing some videos with his thoughts on several chapters at a time, so I really enjoy those. You should check them out. Pablo's also a reader and aspiring writer, and also in med school, so he's got a really interesting channel that you should totally check out. They both have cool channels. You should totally check them out. I'll link them in the descriptions below. I also wanted to give a huge shout out to Epic Tales for tagging me to do the video, and also just for being a huge help in getting this channel up and running. He's given me a bunch of advice on filming and editing over the past few months here, and always answers my questions no matter how simple they might be, so you should totally check him out, especially if you like Grimdark, and I'll also link his channel below. So that is the tag video. As always, thanks for stopping by my channel. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing if you're interested in hearing more about my thoughts on various stories and following along with my writing journey, as well as seeing more of these tag videos come along. Leave a comment below if you've got thoughts on any of the answers I gave to these questions. Have you read or want to read any of the books I mentioned? Or as always, just feel free to say hello. I post videos on Sunday and Wednesday. Until next time, I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will catch you here in the next video.